We're jumping into this topic today and on Comm Academy about promotions or market, or how do you promote your events really well? How do you set up the church really well to promote the events that are happening? How do you take care of the needs of the ministries that you serve as a communications director? And how do you take care of the resources of the church and make sure that everything's done really well? So ultimately, our goal is to help you become your church's your brand expert, become the expert in your brand, so that you can serve your church well, serve the ministry well, the ministries that are inside the church really well. We want to help you turn strangers into people that contribute to the church. So we want to move them along in this journey. And as we promote events, that has a great opportunity to take place. And over the years, I've kind of seen that happening. If we do it well, if we promote events really well, then we get to see new people coming into the church as a result of that. And then they move all the way along where they join the church and even start to contribute. We also want to help you steward your resources well. We're stewards of what God has given to us. And so when we plan well, when we promote well, then we're stewarding what God has given to us. And that's really a good thing. Makes you feel really good when you're not paying that extra fee for the late shipments that you're trying to get. And then also we want to help you say yes to the right things. Too many times we say yes to things where we shouldn't have. Maybe we do something a little bit too much, or we do something too little. But we need to know what is the right thing for us to do when it comes to promoting events at the church, and what are the things that we should not do. Just because we saw another church or another ministry do something doesn't mean that it's right for us. So when we do this well, we get to see three big things happen: more guests. And the result of that is that more life change takes place, because ultimately we're inviting them into the gospel, and that's awesome. Like, we get to see that people get transformed by that, and then we get to see people contribute. So as they are transformed, now they get to be a part, and they get to help other people transform through their time, their resources, whatever that looks like. So when this is done really well, it's a beautiful thing, and I think it's why we do ministry. It fires us up to see this process take place. Dennis, anything to add to this?
No, I think, Michael, you did a great job. When we talk about event planning or anything as it relates to promotion or even outreach, I think, the goal is always, how do we take strangers, turn them into spectators, turn them into participators, and then ultimately turn them into contributors? Another word for that is disciples, right? So the content that you're going to hear today, I encourage you to lean in. But don't just watch this content. Start to think of ways of how you can begin to apply this, or start having some conversations with the people on your team about the frameworks and the things that we're going to show you today. Because again, my communication background, due to poor planning, I've had a lot of times where I would stay up for literally 24 hours to get something done for something that was needed on a Sunday or something, like literally. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, literally 24 hours, like no sleep to get something done because of poor planning. So this is going to save you time. It can allow you to steward your resources well, so then that way you can invest into other areas within your ministry.
Yeah, it's funny. I think we all have funny stories in our past of being communications directors and pulling those long hours to get something. So for me, I can remember the church alarm set at 11 o'clock at night. And I remember running at 10:58 to get out of the church, because I've been working on some project for so long before. So I had to get out of the church before the alarm went off. So we want to solve that problem, and that's our goal today. So this is just a little journey that I found. So as I look back and I see my own experiences, the green letters basically represent kind of the state. So at first we were confused within the communication director role. Like, it's confusing. There's just a lot going on. People are asking for a lot, and so what we need is a plan. That's step 2 down there at the bottom, and then what ultimately we want to do is become the expert. What I mean by expert is it's really a humble idea. It's not about being boastful. It's like, if you're the expert, then you get to guide the church and
Okay.
help everyone win. So we want to help you become the expert today. How can I do this? How can I help everyone to win? The people we serve in the church, they want to do ministry. They want to transform, see hearts transformed, and we want to help them to do that really well. So step one is that we have to get clear. So the system we're going to talk about is first starts off with clarity. If we're not clear, if everybody's not on the same page of like what are the objectives of what we're trying to accomplish, then everybody has an opinion as to what is the win, and
That's
it
right.
becomes very confusing.
If you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there.
Yeah, yeah. Dennis, you say it all the time. If you what's the planning phrase that you say all the time?
If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail.
That's like your motto, man. I hear you
Yeah,
say that all the time. Step two is to create the right experience. So once we're clear, then we get to create the right experience, the right promotional materials. Until we're clear, like we're just guessing. But once we do get clear about here's what we're trying to accomplish, here's what we're trying to do, then we know, okay, well, here's the types of promotions that are needed to get the job done. And again, we get to say yes to the right things and no to things that are not right for us. Just because like the youth pastor has an idea for a video doesn't mean that that's a great, thing that we should do. We need to be the expert and say, hey, based on what you're trying to accomplish, here's what we need to do to get that done well. And then number three, we need to attract people. So the promotions, marketing, events, that type of thing. The goal is to get people to show up. How many times have we had events at churches and at our church and like nobody comes or hardly anybody comes? So one of the main objectives, it sounds really simple, but we need to get people to take their next step and actually
that's right.
do the thing that we're asking them to do. And I've seen promotions done where it's just like you're doing work just to spin the wheels and like nobody takes action. So we want to get very, very clear of like, how do we get people to take the action we're asking them to do? And again, that comes from the clarity that we have in the beginning. Like just a quick, in marketing world, the more options we give people, the less they take action.
That's
So
right.
in that first step where we're getting clear, like we need to define like what is the call to action, the one thing we want people to do, and then let's get really clear about what that is. And then number four, we have to get buy-in. So we need to get people to actually take action. So we need to attract them, make sure they understand what the next step is. And then we need to get them to buy in or to take the action that we're getting them to do. So they're going to click that button on the website because they know that that's what they're supposed to do. Or they'll show up on Tuesday at 7 p.m. because they know that's exactly what they're supposed to do.
Right.
All right, so that's the idea.
Yeah.
When we get this right and we're promoting things right, this is what it starts to look like. So there's a problem that I've seen a lot of churches have. We have events, but it's hard to find the right way to promote these events. And so there's an example of like a men's ministry event that I used to be on staff as a communications director, and we would have an event. And then the problem was like, we didn't know how to communicate the value of this event. Like, what are the benefits of coming to it? So then here's what it's looked like. This is just a practical example of what this started to look like. So what we want to do when we're promoting something is actually provide a solution to a problem. Sounds really
That's
simple,
right.
but whatever the event is that we're doing, it's a solution to a problem. So when we communicate that, we need to communicate what the problem is, what is the solution that we're providing, and then what is the result that people will get from coming to this event. Okay, so these three parts will help us to communicate it really, really well, both online, in print, and even from the stage if you're announcing it. Like this is a simple formula that'll just help you do this really well. So let's say we have the men's event. The problem might be something like, hey, you're really busy. We understand you're really busy. It's hard to find a group of guys that you can hang out with. So that's the problem. Like we know that men are busy and it's hard to find friends. So the solution is we have this men's event. We're going to provide an event where you can hang out with other guys and do fun stuff together. So stuff like cornhole, barbecue, football, whatever that is at the event, right? So that's our solution. It's a place to gather with a bunch of other guys, do fun stuff, get to know each other. The result is for this men's event, you'll meet some friends and have fun doing this event. So it's friends and fun. That's the result. We're promising you'll meet some people and you're going to have fun. So again, if we communicate that, usually men would say, yes, sign me up. That's exactly what I need. Dennis,
And
any thoughts?
one thing to add to this too is like when you approach it with this framework, it also helps you to make better decisions on what you need at your event, right? So like when you start going through the problems, you're going to notice some internal problems and you're going to notice some external problems, right? Just so you, from my background, the organization that I founded and then worked for, we used to do the nation, or we still do the nation's largest bullying prevention events. And I can tell you, like, this same concept works for at a small scale, like a 200-person event, and it also works at the large scale, a 2,000-person in-house with 250,000 people tuning in via simulcast. It's like it's still the same framework. So when you approach this framework in this way, it also allows you to know here's what everything you might here's all of the things that you're going to need to think about as you're trying to get people to this event. And that's the thing I love about these frameworks, especially within the church space. Is like they're really like principles for you to follow as well, that you're going to see the value in different areas of your communication.
Yeah. Excellent. So that's really the goal. Like, so overall, just to kind of reset, I want to show you a system that I created a while back to help my church to communicate really well when it comes to like events, and we would plan well in advance to do it. So let me pull this up on the screen so you can see it here. But the problem was that I saw over and over again is that we had low attendance at our events. So again, I was on staff at a church as a communications director. This church was about 2,000 or so people on a weekend. So lots of people, lots of resources, lots of events throughout the year, lots of ministries wanting lots of promotions.
Yep.
What I saw is that there was a low attendance though, like we'd promote something and not a lot of people would show up. There'd be a lot of waste. So we'd have to order stuff last minute to get it here on time. And we're paying the extra, $80 to get it shipped next day, that type of thing. And there was just a lot of pressure. So in this position, it was myself and a couple other people that were, we had different roles within communication. And there was just a lot of pressure, like late nights, all the stuff we talked about. So the solution that I'm going to show you here today is that it allowed us to have clarity, like well in advance. It's clear, not only to us, our team, our communications team, but also to the ministries that we're serving. Like everybody was clear. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. It also provided creativity. So now we can actually run in the areas of our strength and be creative and have fun, like because we knew in advance, hey, here's what needs to be done, and we get to be creative to make sure that it's done really well. And we were great stewards of our resources that we had, our time, great stewards of our the volunteers that we were using to maybe accomplish some of this stuff, and great stewards of the church credit card where we're spending money to buy different materials.
That's right.
So the result is that once we applied the system, growth began to happen. So our church began to grow. We began to see more people at the men's event than ever before. Easter was the biggest Easter ever. Whatever we did with the system that I'm about to show you, like it created the biggest event, that we've ever had in the history of the church, and growth began to take place. I put joy on there too. Like the result was joy. Like I had fun. Like my team, people that working with me, the volunteers, we just had fun. Like we knew what we needed to do, and we got to do things that we enjoyed doing as creatives, and it just brought joy to the work. And I've been on the flip side of this where it's stressful all the time. Dennis, you ever experienced that?
The opposite. Yeah, it's the opposite. Instead of joy, it's frustration, a loss of the fruits of the spirit.
Yeah. And also kind of on I've actually had an experience with somebody that was in the creative department of a church, and because of everything, the stress and everything, like they ended up leaving that position. They ended up leaving the church. They ended up leaving God, because they just had such a terrible experience that, and that's the reality. Like if we don't do this well and steward well, then that's a result that can happen.
Yeah.
And also, one of the results that can happen too is innovation. Like we get to be innovative and we get to do things. Um, and I'll show this innovation. I call this an innovation. We'll unpack it so that you can start to see what this looks like. And again, the problem we're trying to solve here is that if you're a communications person at your church, whether you're a volunteer, a pastor that's wearing all the hats, or maybe this is your position at the church, you're on staff and this is your role, we want to help you win. I want to show you the system that we created that'll help you to promote events really well. So I'm going to walk you through it. This is what it looks like on my screen. There's 4 steps to it. Dennis, if you want to jump in at any point, or if anybody has any questions, let me know. But we're going to talk through each of these 4 steps, one step at a time. And I'll show you kind of a practical example of what this looks like when it all comes together. Okay, so step number 1, if you're going to promote events really well, you need to gather all the events for the year. So it's, again, as a communications director, it is your job to be the expert and to lead. So that's why they hired you. Like, yes, you need to produce the content, but hey, the church, they need us to lead in this area. So what I did is I gathered the department heads, and we got together like in November, and we said, hey, based on what you have planned for next year, let me list out all the events that you're going to need promoted. So on the far left, I'll kind of zoom in here on section number 1. Whoops, I'm zooming out. Let me go in. Number 1, I created a list on a whiteboard. I literally got a whiteboard that was on the wall, and we just listed out everything, every event that was happening for the ministries throughout the year. Okay. So then what we did, step 2, was to create a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 for each of those events. Let me, I'm getting ahead a little bit, but let me show you what a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 looks like. Actually, let me step back one to step 2 here before we get to step 3, which is the tiers. Okay, tier 2 is to write down every form of media or promotional content that we can create within the church, that we have the means to create. So everything that's printed, everything that's digital, and everything maybe that's video or photography, that type of thing. So we just list out, here's all the options that we have for promoting something. So you might write down a poster in the lobby, or you might write down a mailer or invite cards. Those are all printed materials. For digital, you might write down screens in the auditorium, screens that can also be in the lobby if you have a TV screen out in the lobby. Maybe there's a social media post. Maybe there's a Facebook cover. Maybe you could do, some other things like digitally. Okay, and then video. Maybe there's like a quick testimony video, or maybe there's like a talking head video. So there's different types of videos that we can probably put in there as well. So we just want to list out all the options that you have available. Like, if you can't do it at your church, don't write it down. But if you have it available, and then also here's kind of the innovative part of it. You want to create a system out of it. So don't reinvent it every single time. So what we did is that in the lobby, I bought poster holders that were 2 foot by 3 foot, and we put those in strategic locations in the lobby. And then whenever we had a big promotion, we just put a poster in there, and it was just a system. We know we had to create a poster that's 2 foot by 3 foot. And if we did that, we can cover the lobby and we're good. So we're creating a system. It's the same size every single time. We're not trying to reinvent it. Dennis, any thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, as it relates to the system aspect, I think that's where a lot of communications people as a whole, tend to make more work for themselves, right? For just a quick example, a lot of the clients I work with, for the longest time, we were doing Photoshop and Illustrator, and those platforms are great. But, with Canva, we were able to then take the things that we've been doing, and we've been able to reuse a lot of elements in a lot shorter time span. So one of the things that you always want to do, especially as a communications person, is you always want to identify systems that you can put in place so you're never redoing anything from scratch, right? Now, here's the benefit of doing that. The benefit of doing that too is also, if you're a communications person, you should not be doing your job by yourself. Part of your role is to train somebody else or to bring somebody else along the journey with you, but they can't follow you if they have no starting point, right? So I'm a big person as it relates to planning, as it relates to systems. because it is going to save you a lot of time in the long run. And what that's also going to require you to do is it's going to require you to get organized. So if you're not totally organized, like if your things are all over the place, it's going to require you to start storing to start learning how to store or organize your folders, whether that's on a Dropbox or on a Google Drive, right? I know that like I'm not a very organized person. Like I wasn't born an organized person, but I learned that I had to be, right? As I started developing in this communications role.
That's a really good point. I would not have considered myself an organized person either, but
Mhm.
the pain that I felt created a need for me to figure this out.
Yeah.
So again, on the left, we just list out all the events. We list out the dates. So is it January? Is it March? Is it June? Like, what does that look like? List out all the dates. We then column number 2 here, we write down all the different types of communications avenues that we have available to us. By the way, when we talk through this with the department heads at our church, now they're all on the same page. Oh, this is what we
Mhm.
have available to us. This is
Yep.
what our team is able to do. Okay, I get it. Now everybody's playing by the same rules. The youth it's usually the youth pastor, so I like to pick on the youth pastor. The youth pastor doesn't come up with this great idea where it's like, hey, can we get a blimp to fly over the building? And so that's not in our playbook. So no, the answer is no. And also you want to get the lead pastor to keep, the leadership of the church on board to sign off to say, this is it. This is our system. Everybody commit to it. Let's go. Okay, then the third part of the system. Oh, by the way, we're going to write down cost. Like if the print, if you know, like it's 500 postcards that serves your congregation, or 250 business cards that are invites, you can actually ahead of time get the cost of that. And
Yeah,
now you're really able to like lock it in, like budgets and everything.
that's right.
So the third part of it is to create a tier system. Okay, based on all the events that we listed out. A tier, and then based on all the different ways we have to communicate, let's create a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 type system. So tier 1 gets everything. Like these are all the different ways we can communicate. So everything goes into tier 1. Tier 2 gets bits and pieces of it. And then tier 3 gets kind of the lesser amount. And a lot of times it's based on budget. So tier 1 might, let's say, cost $1,000 to do that. Tier 2, well, we can still promote it well, but it doesn't cost 1,000, it costs 100. And then tier 3, we can still promote the event really well, but it's free. Like we can use maybe social media channels or whatever, and it's more of a free option. So based on the size of the event, how many people it impacts, and kind of what you can agree on with the leadership of the church, you then list out, are all these events over here on your original list in column 1? Is it a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3?
Mhm.
Now, again, if everybody's in the room and you're saying this is a tier 2 event, the youth pastor can be like, no, man, that's a tier 1. And then, the lead pastor can be like, no, we can't do a tier 1. We're not going to spend $1,000 on the youth, barbecue that you're having. Let's make it a tier 2. So everybody's on the same page, and there's
Good.
less. So, and then this is done in November for the next year. So you're getting everything in advance. So again, you need to work. You need to lead your church leadership, get them on board with this, like the lead pastor, the executive pastor, whoever that is for you, to help you kind of back this up, and then lead the conversation and kind of figure out this piece of it here. So the fourth part is the budget piece. So you can actually now figure out the cost. Like I don't know about you, but when I was on staff, they would always ask me, how much are you going to spend next year on promotions and stuff? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, it depends on what everybody's asking for. But now in advance, I can steward the resources well, and I can figure out in November a ballpark of what we will spend next year based on this system. So yes, there's going to be some last minute things, but we're trying to, year 1, this is going to be a little bit rough, but year 2 might get better. And then by year 3, you should be humming, where everybody knows the playbook, they know the rules of the game, and they're supporting and helping you to do this, because ultimately they win. Like when we
That's
are
right.
able to promote their event really well, that department head wins because they get to see a lot of people show up at their events and take next steps.
That's good.
All right. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. You can put that in the chat. Or if there's anything that pops up here. I know this is kind of a lot of information, but it's a simple idea, but it takes a minute to pull it all together. Okay, so I just want to jump over real quick and show you, this is a real life example. Like this was the actual document. I actually dug it up in my archives. I'll see if I can enlarge it here a little bit. So this is the actual document that I created. It was on an 11 by 17 sheet of paper, and this is what it looked like. So on the far left, this is, again, a large church, a couple thousand people. On the far left, these were all the events. And then I went ahead and put them into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and actually had a tier 4 for this. So we put them all in there at the beginning of the year. And then on this column, right, this gray column here shows all the different ways we can promote events that were available to us. And on the far right, this was the tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I have a budget at the top here. It looks like tier 1 cost $4,560 to run the tier 1 play. And then tier 2 cost $1,260, tier 3 was $900, and tier 4 was free. And then we just put the check marks into so we assigned like tier, like starting point right here was a tier, whatever that event was, it was called starting point. It was a tier 2. So then we knew that tier 2 got all of these different items here. And so our team was able to work in advance to say, hey, starting point, we can start developing all these different pieces well in advance, so we're not doing stuff last minute. And then,
Michael,
yeah,
quick question for you. So for a person that's listening to this right now, what's some so a person that's listening to this right now, they don't have the system set up yet. What are some practical steps you can advise on how to start introducing this idea to the overall team?
Yeah, so to start this off, you might not be able to do the year, but you probably could do the next quarter. So at the time of this recording, we are in August. Well, what if we can just have a meeting with everybody and just ask them to come to that meeting with all their events in quarter 4, so which starts in October, November, December. Like, what's everything in quarter 4 that you want to promote? And then I would the starting point would be to, again, get a whiteboard of some kind and just write everything down. Like, here's everything that you can have them submit it ahead of time, so maybe saves a little bit of time for everybody. Write all the events down on the board. Here's everything that's going on. And again, this gets everybody on the same page. Like, they may not realize how much is going on in the church, but when you put it on that board, they might be like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that." And then you write down on that whiteboard all the different ways you can promote that event or any event. And then try to get a commitment of like, is this are we, with this event that's happening, let's say it's a fall festival that's happening on October 31st. Is this a tier 1 that gets everything, or this is a tier 2 that gets maybe a little bit or a little less than tier 1? Maybe start at that point and then see how far you can get with that, and then just do it one quarter at a time.
So as far as who's in those meetings, would you say these are like department heads, team leads, overseers? What would you say? Who's in those meetings for those for to make the decisions on what's going on within that lane of ministry?
It's the people that have the power to say yes or no within their departments. So it's going to be the leadership. It's going to be like the youth pastor, the kids pastor, they might bring along with them an assistant if your church is big enough that has more details or something along those lines. But this only works if leadership is involved.
That's right.
So again, your lead pastor, if they're kind of in the game when it comes to this stuff, like, ask them to be in the room. Or if you have an executive pastor or associate pastor that's more in this type of game, ask them to be in the room. You need to leverage their authority to to kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page.
And then one of the things I'll say with this too is the reason why I asked that question is because usually, I find, from a communication director standpoint, like sometimes, there will be a ton of people that come with their requests, and that person may not be a team lead. They might just be a very involved volunteer. And then they'll start coming to you and they'll start making these requests and asking you if you could do this or if you could do that. So I would say, just to add to this, it's that uh, along with this system, it's important for leadership or team leaders to understand that if there are any requests that need to be made, that should come from a like one leadership person within that lane of ministry that has the final say. Because once all of these meetings and different things happen, um, then that person, because they've had been in the room, they will know, okay, hey, no, our church won't have bandwidth for that. And what that will do is that will actually save you a ton of time. I used to get bombarded with messages from just about everybody, like volunteers, you name it, right? So that would be a system that I would say, to just keep in mind that the reason why these leaders are in this meeting is so that the people who are the final decision makers, they know what's going on, right? And then everybody in their team should know if they have any ideas or any requests or thoughts on things to go directly to their leadership and not to you, the communications person.
So we want to eliminate that last minute stuff that happens, in every church. We want to, like, we won't, like, I think it's, as a communication, like, we're here to serve the church, like, that's our role, to serve. But if we do this well, we can minimize the amount of those last minute requests that are going on. And again, year one's going to be a little bit rough, but as you do, or quarter one might be a little rough. But when you do, the next quarter and the next quarter, it's going to get tighter and tighter. And again, they're going to love this. After a while, they're going to love this, and they're going to be able to give you that information in advance. And it really levels up their ministry. Like, that's one of the byproducts of this that I saw when I was a communications director. I implemented this, and all of a sudden, like, the kids ministry got better. Like, they got better at communicating with the parents. They got better at communicating, like, in advance, like, here's what we're doing. Here's the details of what we're doing, because they knew that they had to give that stuff to us. And again, I had the church leadership, the pastor of the church, that said, I bless this, whatever that looks like,
Yeah.
at your church.
Yeah, cool.
But yes, I got their authority behind it to where this became the system. And it was a beautiful thing to see, the church growing as a result of, like, just being able to communicate better. Ultimately, as a church, we were serving the congregation, we were serving the community better because we did this.
Great.
So let's take a look at a couple things. How do we plan in advance? What's our plan for the day of the event? And then what does our plan look like for after the event is over? Because this is an important part of this as well. So we'll kind of wrap up with these ideas here. Number one, in advance, when we're planning the event, we need to get clear, right? So we talked about that. And I just put 8 to 10 weeks out. Like, that's just a good ballpark. So if something's getting ready to happen in December, you should be planning that in, like, October, maybe even September. Okay.
Yeah.
So that kind of blows somebody's mind. I just, wake up right now if you're on the floor, just, but that's the idea. How do we start planning Christmas when it's still summer, right? We want to get to that point. So we're going to ask some questions that are going to help the promotions be done really well. And honestly, it's going to help the ministry be successful. So what is the win? So that's one of the questions I would ask. Like, let's use a Christmas Eve service or something that might be coming up. Like, hey, what's the win of this Christmas Eve service? Are we trying to get a lot of people there? Are we trying to get new people there? Are we trying to get just our whole church to show up? Like, what is the win for this event? Who's the target audience? So again, who are we trying to get to show up? Is it the congregation, or are we trying to reach people in the community? Because the way we promote that, it's going to be different. What is the call to action for the promotion? Like, do they need to sign up? Does there need to be like a click here button somewhere, or QR code, or do they just need to show up? How does the event support the mission of the church? So again, this is us kind of helping to be that expert to guide people.
Mhm.
So it's just good to be clear on that. Okay, so our church is all about being a community church and serving the community. So, okay, how does this Christmas Eve event serve the community? How does it support that? And honestly, you can get some good like language pieces out of that if you ask the right question, and then all of a sudden it's
That's
like,
right.
oh, that's it. Now you know how to write some copy for this event. How will we follow up with attendees after the event? So again, as communications people, like that's an important question. Like, oh, we're gonna have a whole bunch of people show up. That's awesome. How are we gonna follow up? Like, especially if it's new people that are coming to the church from the outside, we should have a mechanism in place to make sure that this event is as impactful as possible. So again, when I said, hey, this is going to help you grow your church, you can kind of see by asking these questions, yeah, this is going to help us grow. We're going to follow
Mhm.
up with people better. And ultimately the church begins to grow as a result of it. Any other thoughts, Dennis, on before the event, like as you're planning, like what should we be thinking about?
No, I think this covers it really well. Um, and then, sometimes I know that like in the busyness of things, we can kind of just bypass this and just kind of get things done. You want to avoid doing that as much as possible. A lot of these things, like it may feel mundane, it may feel like, okay, it's another meeting that we have to go to. But when you put these systems in place, I guess this is just a little encouragement, right? When you put these systems in place, or when you put these practices in place, you will see the result, right? You will go into the event day actually with clarity, right? And when you go in with clarity, you're going to see that magically things will run a lot smoother. And then after you've done this one, two, three, or four times, just going to know what to expect, and you're going to be able to do these events with excellence.
Yeah, and so there's probably two different meetings. You're talking about meetings. Like this is a quarterly meeting to kind of get this in place. This meeting is more like a one-on-one. Like, okay, you're getting ready to promote that kids event. Okay, this is what you meet up with that kids ministry leader, and these are the questions you ask one-on-one with that leader. So this is the second part of it, your promotions. Okay, so these are questions we need to ask. What type of media? So on the right-hand side there, we see the tier system. So in advance, we're writing down all the different ways we can promote the church. And then we have it broken down into tier one, tier two, tier three. Yeah, these are the different packages that we have. Okay, so we're asking what media is needed and be able to know that from the tier system. Number two, when will promotions run? So not when's the event, but when are we going to start promoting the event? Because our due
Mhm.
dates, right? Our due dates are going to be way ahead of the event. Okay. What are the event details and themes? Okay. So if they're going to have barbecue sandwiches and photo booth and all that stuff, we just need to know all that in advance so we can put it on the promotions, because that's going to be a feature of the event that we want people to see. Or if there's themes, if it's like a Wild West theme for this event, okay, we should know that. That way we can promote it well and stay on point. What is the call to action for the promotions? Okay, this one is it sounds very simple, but people miss it. Like, do people just okay? So a call to action is just show up at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, or a call to action could be click here, to register, or scan the QR code to register, or whatever that looks like. We just need to know what is the call to action and try to make it simple. It's like one call to action. Maybe there's a couple different, like it's a registration. You could do it in the lobby, or you can scan the QR code, something like that. But keep it simple. Okay. And then you want to run promotions about 4 weeks ahead of the event. So people come to church typically once per month. Once every 4 weeks is kind of the stats. Once every 3 weeks, I think, is the actual stat that's out there right now. Once every 3 weeks. So you want to hit them at least once, maybe twice. So if you run it 4 weeks out, you're going to hit them at least once, maybe twice. So any thoughts on this, Dennis?
Yeah. What I often try to do is I often try to go 7 to 8 weeks out. but now that's not realistic for most churches. So 4 weeks out is a good timeline. For the clients that I work with, I try to get them to start thinking 7 to 8 weeks out. Um, because of that reason that you just said, that most people are, I think the stats like 1 point something, like the monthly attendance. So that's why I try to go 7 to 8 weeks out, but I do find that most churches can get it within that 4 week window. So I often say try to shoot for 7 or 8 if you can. But then if you land at 4, that would be great. Um, and the idea behind this tier system, and I love how you laid it out, Michael, is you're going to realize there's a bunch of things that you could be doing, uh, but then when you break it out into this tier system, not everything that you could do is necessarily everything that you should do, right? And I think when you present this, I would even print this out for your team. When you present this for your team, again, that youth pastor might want a video for their barbecue, and it's an awesome idea, but it's just not the main thing or what we're trying to accomplish as a ministry, right? And again, I think this area of promotions is where a lot of communications people, that's where a lot of our times get thrown out the door, essentially, because we're trying to fulfill every request. We're trying to create a video for every single event. And then what happens is when we're trying to do all of these things at once, we begin to lose quality. So then we'll create something quick just to get it out there, but then it's not quality and it's not excellent, right? Um, so it's super important that you get your team on the same page for these promotions, and then leverage tools like Canva for churches, right? Leverage the templates that we've actually already created. If you're a Calm Academy member, we have kits available to you. They might not necessarily be the exact kit that you need in terms of the text, but all of those things are editable. So if you have that quarterly meeting and like these are the big tier things that I need to essentially execute, go through a library like Canva for churches and start looking for those templates. Remember that you don't need to reinvent the wheel, and you don't need to do something from scratch. And maybe so a lot of the communications directors that I work with, a lot of the times is that they're waiting for direction from their senior leader. But one of the things you can do is you can actually be proactive, and you can say, hey, this is our calendar for the next quarter. These are the things that you said that you want to talk about, or maybe your pastor already gave you a sermon series. Use a free subscription like Canva for churches, and especially if you're a Calm Academy member, you have special access to the kids. Use a subscription like that to start at least lining up the design style to help you get ahead of the event.
Excellent. Yeah, and I know Sarah submitted this question. So from what I understand, she's fairly new to the job, coming into this position. There's a worship pastor that kind of oversees everything. So I would, if you're a volunteer, if you're kind of in a position not of authority, like find the authority that's above you and then come up with that tier system together, and then make sure that that can get across to everybody. Like, this is what is available. And that way you're not getting that last minute request for that video that's going to take you, way more time than they understand to produce.
Yeah.
All right. So part number 3 here, the event day. So what do we do on the event day? So let's make sure we have a plan for that. So we should have like great hospitality. So maybe there's pop signs or some flags or some other things from a media perspective that you can provide for that event to make it a welcoming experience. Maybe there's signage. Maybe that room is not the same room that it is on Sunday, so it's a different room for that event. Well, maybe there's some good signage that just lets people know, like, this is what the room is. So let's provide great hospitality. So again, we are the experts that's serving that ministry, and we're trying to think through a lot of this stuff to help them to win. Okay, get a clear call to action for their next step to get connected. So if we got a whole bunch of people to show up at this event, it's a harvest festival. Okay, let's make sure we have a call to action for their next step to come to church on Sunday for the new series that's called relationship goals or whatever it is. Let's make sure we have an advertisement for that somewhere. So there's our next step. That's a big mistake I've seen a lot of churches make. They spend a lot of time, money, and resources to have an event, but then they don't have a call to action to then come back to the church. So let's make sure we have that built in. Capture information of any new people. Get their name, very least get a first name and an email address. You know, maybe you can get some more, whatever it is, but make sure you can follow up with them with an email at the very least. Make sure we capture information. In business world, like this is key. Like this is huge. Like you don't do anything unless you capture an email or you know something to where you can follow up. So let's not miss out on that as a church. And then capture video and to use your phone just to capture the event. Don't let it go to waste. You know, where you have all these people at this event, make sure we capture it, and we can use those for promotions for the next one. We can use it to celebrate on social media. Hey, we did this great event. A lot of people came. So make sure we capture it. And then also make sure we're posting on social media. Maybe there's a live aspect of this where we're posting live. Doesn't have to be, but maybe at the end of the event, we can take one of those pictures that we took or a few of them and post it online and just let people know that, you know, we're letting the light shine in our community, like through social media. But that's part of our checklist. Like, how do we let our light shine? That we just did this great thing. Let's let people know about it and put it out there. Dennis, thoughts on the day of?
Yeah. You know, I think it's always good to, you know, do a, you know, in my world, we call it a run of show the day of the event. So everything that, you know, people can expect going through. One of the things that I used to do, you know, a lot of times is we would do a walkthrough of the whole facility or the whole area, making sure everybody is, you know, positioned properly, everything is where it needs to be. So ultimately, everybody can have a great experience. Now, from that experience, we always want to have a rope that the next rope that they can swing to, the next step, right? Now, the most important thing that a lot of people forget about is capturing the video photography. Now, if you don't have, maybe you don't have a photography team, but if you have an iPhone, you want to come out of that event with like 300 photos, right? The reason being is because you want to build an asset library, especially if this is an event that you are going to do again next year or in a few months. You want to have assets from that event because, again, anything that you do, there should be a repeated system that you're creating from it. So I've seen it so many times where churches they'll have an event and you know you'll hear something like, "Oh, we didn't have anybody to take photos," right? You know, I don't care who it is. If it's just a volunteer, you want to get assets from that event, and not just for the current social media post, right? Because you're going to be able to take some photos that you can reuse in other places, right? So every event, especially where there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of traffic, every event is an opportunity for you to build your asset library that can help your overall system in the long run.
Excellent. So the final part to this system is your evaluation. So after the event, let's just make sure we evaluate and celebrate, right? So I know Dennis, you've got a great system in place. I'll let you share that, but the idea is to ask the right questions. Was the win achieved? Like, okay, we said in the beginning, like 8 weeks ago, that the win was X, Y, or Z, you know, to get people to show up from the community or whatever that looks like. So then we need to evaluate, was the win achieved? Did we get people to show up from the community? Okay. Number two, what went as planned? What didn't go as planned? That's number three. How do we follow up with the attendees? So again, we're having that follow-up conversation. And then just write down any notes for next time. So Dennis, I know you've got a more systematic way to do this. What does that look like?
So it's called a SWOT analysis, SWOT. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Now, a great way to systematize this is, let's say you have different teams that are serving at that event, right? So, you know, usually your team should do a pre-huddle before that event, right? Where they get together, they talk, or they go through planning center, whatever that may look like. But afterwards, it's very important to try to create time or space at some point for the evaluation and for the celebration, right? A lot of times, because we're moving to the next thing, we forget about this piece entirely. So one of the things that you can do is if you have a team that served, even if this is just for 5 minutes, right? This doesn't have to be a long, drawn out meeting, but even if it's for 5 minutes before everybody leaves, find some space or some time to just get everybody together and just do a quick SWOT analysis. So what was the strengths? What were some weaknesses that we noticed? What are some opportunities that we saw? What are some threats? Maybe the threats were, okay, hey, there was nobody greeting people, and this wasn't set up. So if this happens again, people might not want to come back, whatever that may be. But you want to go through it at the team level, right? And then that team leader can bring it on to the team leader level or the director level, right? So this is a form of evaluation. So from the bottom up, if you're thinking from a hierarchy standpoint, everybody is evaluating what's going on. And then you're also hearing feedback from your team. And it's also important that people know that they're being heard, right? So this is a whole nother topic, but it's important that people know that they're being heard and that their feedback and opinions are valued. And then you as a team leader, or the team leader takes that back to the director. And what you want to do is you want to have this stored somewhere so then you can go back to it as you're preparing for the next event. Because if we're doing something once, we always want to be getting better. We don't want to stay where we started, and then we don't want to stop where we are.
So good. So I want to show you just a final tool, and then we'll kind of wrap it up here. But let me share my screen one more time. And there's a couple different softwares that can help you with this. On my screen right now, this is Asana. There's also another great one called Trello. These are free to use. My favorite right now is Asana, so I'm going to show you this. But it's a way for us to plan in advance. Like here's what's coming up. So this is one of my clients that I work with right now. This is their board. And so we have just different projects that are going on. So you get to create a card for the projects. And these are upcoming projects. You can assign due dates. You can assign people to interact with the project, that type of thing. You can then, the way we have it is that we now move it into the in progress. If we're working on it, that's where it is. Then if we finished it and now the department needs to review it, that's in that section. If there's any revisions, we put it in this column here. So this card just keeps on moving across. And these cards, you can actually, if I click into one of them, you can see that we could put a bunch of notes in there. We could put links. We could put like all the answers to the questions that we went over. We could put all of those answers in here. We could put resources like any pictures that we might need for whatever. Asana also has a chat feature where you can actually comment. So people can give you feedback on the design and everything right there in Asana. And then it hooks up to your email to where you get notifications that, somebody left a comment. So it's a great tool. It's probably my favorite tool right now. It's free to start using. There's a paid level to it, but it's free to start using. And it does a really good job of just organizing everything. And then again, you just get to move the cards along the process so that you can track where it is. And not only you, but the people that you're working with, the people in the church that are involved in the project, they can be a part of this too, and they can kind of see where the project is and where they can interact or give you feedback on the process. Dennis, any thoughts on Asana or any other system?
Yeah, so I've used Asana. I've used Trello. Trello is another a good one that's very simple to use. It's just a board, and then I use one called ClickUp. Creating these tools are good because you want to have a place where you can store all of these things that you're working on, because then the following year you can actually go back and you can duplicate that card, right? But I think the most important thing is you want to systematize what you're doing. And the reason why is not just to make your life easier, but it's to just make the whole ministry better. Because again, I want to go back to this thing is if you're doing this thing called communications, this is not a one person role, and you need to build a team. even if that's a volunteer. So once you start systematizing these things and creating processes, uh, let's say if you're no longer at the church, you'll actually have something that you can pass down uh, to somebody else, so then they can take the mantle and they can keep it moving.
So good, so good. And on the right hand side here, you can kind of see these are resources that we might use all the time. So there's just a column of like, this is our tier system. It's just a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So you can kind of see what's in there. This is our Zoom links. If you have a meeting and you're like, oh, what's that Zoom link again? Like, okay, there it is. It's all in one place. We have a promotion request form that people can fill out. So it has some of those questions ahead of time. So maybe that's something you can implement as a request form that gets the ball rolling. And then from there, you can have people answer some questions to give you information to then have a conversation. I do recommend having a conversation and just make sure you're clear on everything. Okay. You can also put in here like photos, like any like sometimes you might have a library of photos that you can pull from for events. So again, just a resource column with a bunch of different things that you can quickly access. You're not wasting time trying to track them down. So let's wrap it up. So I think
Sarah asked one good question, Michael.
oh yeah.
She says, does your whole church staff use Asana? Because she's the only one at her church that's currently using Asana.
Yes. So the simple answer is yes. And this might be an uphill battle, but if you can create a culture within your church and kind of champion that culture of like, hey, this is the tool we use to promote things at our church, and we need you to hop on here. And so this is just our tool. And everything is all in one place. You can get your proofs. You can get, again, we're going to serve them really, really well. We just got to get them to kind of jump through a couple of hoops to help us do that. And so the answer is yes. How can you champion this process and get people to jump on board with it?
And Michael and I, we actually have a video that we recorded a while back called Leading Leadership. We'll work on making that available for the Common Academy community, because I think a lot of the things that you're going to run into is going to fall into that topic of how do you lead leadership.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think for the most part, as a communications person, like try to be that expert. Again, it's not an arrogant thing. It's more of a, how do I really serve the church that God has called me to and serve them at a very, very high level? And there's just going to be some things that you need as a communicator that gives you the space so that we can do the things that we talked about initially. We can be creative, we can be innovative, we can have joy and serve them really, really well. If we can lead well as an expert of like, hey, I got this figured out. I just need you to do kind of a few things to help me help you. Then it usually comes across as like very sincere and like people are willing to do it. Because that's the heart behind it. We're not trying to command people to say, hey, you're doing it wrong. So that's the heart behind it. So communicate that well. And honestly, when we win, we get to see, again, more people coming to our events, more people, their lives being changed as a result of that. And more people contributing to the vision that God has given to your church for your city. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's well worth fighting for and figuring out for your church. So with that, we'll wrap it up on this session about promoting your events.
Awesome.
All right, Sarah, if you have any further questions, I know you're still on there. Anything that you needed clarity on?
No, I think that was super helpful. I used Asana at my previous workplace, and it was great because we all worked remotely. And so I've been wondering if I should like recommend that to our staff. And so that's something I've kind of been thinking through. Because it is super helpful, especially with our interns too. But I'm the only one who uses it. So I don't know if they provide like some sort of training for that because it's such a built out system. We would want to train them to use it correctly. And so I don't know if you know about that, but
Does your church currently have a system that they're using?
not for task management. Yep. We don't have a shared calendar or anything.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's when some of those tools will be a really great tool for you to use. And then just whenever you're proposing it, make sure you come up with like a plan. So less of like, hey, I think we should use this, because the one thing for ministry leaders is there's a bunch of different tools. So a lot of times, we don't even want to give attention to a new tool or a new product or something else that we have to learn because it's going to take time, right?
Right.
So with my pastor, one of the things that I would do is, hey, kind of like, what's the problem? So like, hey, I noticed X, Y, and Z, and then you can, propose a solution. So, one option that we can do is we can do X, and it would require us to do X, Y, and Z. And then the other option is, and you can give them two options. And then after that, once you give them the solution, you can give them what will the overall result of that solution be, right? So the same things that we learned today, you can use it to essentially propose these ideas. But it's going to say you
you
guys
might
a
have to
ton.
champion it a little bit too, just off what, so you might have to be the person that says, okay, I will find the training videos that we need to then be able to do this. And honestly, at my last position, I would request people to come. I know it's another meeting, but hey, can we just schedule a meeting and can you guys just show up? And then I'm gonna train you on how to use the system and just carve out some time to make it happen. But you do need the leadership, like the authority of the, leadership above you to kind of get behind you with it.
Yeah.
That's really the big sell.
Okay. Yeah. I'll probably have a conversation about that.
But it can start
Awesome.
with the communications. And then I think what people will see is that actually I could probably use this for my stuff in kids ministry or whatever. But for communications, like if you can implement it like, hey, this is our tool for communicating things at our church and promoting things at our church, then I think that's a way for people to say, okay, well, we'll use it for that. And then they can figure out from there what they want to do with it.
Yeah, we have a form set up in Asana to where they can request, like for our e-bulletin that we do for like announcements. They can click on that link and like submit a request and it shows up in my Asana, like task manager and calendar and things. So that's mainly what we use it for, but I just feel like other ministries definitely could use it, for
Good,
their
yeah. But you've done a good job of actually starting the process though, so that's good. Like the fact that you have like request forms in there, uh, and it's not going to be an overnight thing. So like, do exactly what you just did. Like you found one use case, now just find another, and then you can start building it out slowly like that. I even wonder, Michael, if we might even have some templates on Asana that I'm not sure if Asana allows you to export templates. Does it, Michael?
Yeah. Yeah, you can.
Oh,
So
cool.
that's something we could even look into to seeing what templates we can export and provide to the community for those that are using Asana.
Yeah, and Sarah, one other thought too is that if you could hijack part of a meeting, like just ask, if there's already a meeting scheduled for like most of the staff, you could ask, hey, can I get like 3 minutes or 5 minutes while everybody's here to kind of share this system and kind of train them on the bits and pieces of it. So that's another thing that again, I learned after a while, if I'm not going to feel the pain of, the lack of planning in the organization, then I've got to be proactive and I got to figure this out. And so I would be very aggressive on some of those things.
Yeah. It's definitely a good idea.
With the right heart. Like, if you have the right heart behind it, you're not bitter and like,
Yeah. Don't call them all idiots or anything like that. Alrighty.
All right. Well, thanks, Sarah. I appreciate your question. Hopefully this is good. Well, I'd love to keep up with you and see how this is going.
Yes, super helpful. I definitely want to implement that, maybe starting with the quarterly kind of calendar, because we do have like around 1,000 coming on a good Sunday. And so it's pretty wild that we don't have some kind of shared calendar. Things just kind of happen and then it's like, okay. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, since I've joined about like 6 months ago on staff, I'm shocked that we don't have something already implemented, but we definitely need to.
That's good, right?
Yeah. We lack organization in certain aspects, but this position that I'm in has only been around for like 5 years, so it's adapting.
That's good. That's good. And you know, that's the benefit of the Khan Academy community is, you know, because both Michael and I, you know, we've experienced some of these things. So, um, and also wanted to say thank you for just putting in that comment, right? Just because you asked that question now, you know, we have a list of, you know, over a couple of thousand, right? And some of the bits and pieces of this is going to help a lot of other ministries, right? And what we'll do on our end too is like we're actively just trying to find ways of how we can serve you. So any question or any resource you might need, don't be afraid to just ask or put it in the chat, because we might have it already and probably just didn't think it was, you know, that useful to share yet, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, I definitely it's cool to have like a community to where we can ask questions, and y'all have walked through this too. I'd definitely be interested in seeing that video that y'all were talking about regarding
leading
like
leadership,
leading leadership. Yeah, because
yeah,
coming in like really young, like just out of college, like
I'll
I
write
don't
that down.
always feel equipped or like I have the clout to like lead the leadership in that
Yeah.
way. 'Cause I've been here for a long time.
Yeah.
So those types of resources would be really
Mhm.
cool too.
Awesome. Leave it. I'll make a note of it and then I'll get it uploaded. Just so you understand, we've also been working on this new platform. Right now, you know, we're using Slack, but we've been developing this platform where we basically put a lot of the resources that you're going to need, like graphic templates, kits, social media captions, videos, training courses, you name it, along with the ability to communicate on that platform. Um,
Mhm.
I've actually, it's on my to-do list to actually get that video uploaded there. So once I get that uploaded there, I'll share it with the group so everybody can have access to it.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, thank y'all for
Awesome.
everything
Thank you.
that you're doing. This is really cool, very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, and
Right.
so see y'all. Is it next week we have another meeting?
We have
Yeah.
a,
So
yeah, it's a AI. We're doing a training on AI
Okay,
next
yeah, I've
Monday. So,
started using AI
yeah.
for some stuff. It's really cool. There's a lot of capability to it.
yeah, so we actually recorded the first part of it last week. So I
Mhm.
think Michael dropped it in the Slack.
Yeah.
So if you haven't checked that out, and then this week, this next following, we're going to be doing part two.